Hello there and welcome to World News, coming to you live on All 24 News from Algiers. Next up are today's top stories. Algerian president discusses with his Tunisian counterpart solid fraternal bilateral relations between the two countries. Also ahead in our news, death toll from Turkey and Syria's earthquake exceeds 40,000 people. And Mr. Erdogan ranks the disaster as the worst in Turkey's modern history, while rescue operations are still underway. Also coming up, Zionist occupation forces kill another Palestinian young man after an incursion into a camp in southern Tupas. Russian forces reached the strategic city of Bakhmut while NATO warns that Russia is about to launch a larger attack on Ukraine. Hello again and welcome to the program. First in our topical news, Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune held a phone call on Tuesday with his Tunisian counterpart, President Kais Saied, in which they discussed the brotherly relations between our two neighboring countries. The two presidents also discussed bilateral issues of common interest. The African Union ranked Algeria in the leadership in the race to transform the continent into a major global center for energy supplies in light of the record increase in its gas production and the launch of pilot projects to develop the green hydrogen industry, which places it in the ranks of the largest exporters of the blue fuel in Africa.
The African continent is full of all kinds of energy resources, especially gas in huge quantities in Algeria, Egypt and Nigeria, and the same applies to all countries in West and East Africa. Africa is the continent richest in renewable energy resources and the minerals needed for the manufacture of batteries. It is not enough for its needs only, but it has what meets the needs of all countries of the world as well.
During the proceedings of the Algerian-Cuban Mixed Cooperation Committee, Cuban Minister of Foreign Trade Rodrigo Diaz praised Algeria's role in supporting his country. Mr. Diaz, who's co-chairing the event with Algerian Minister of Health Abdelhak Seihi, expressed his hope that this session would be crowned with success for both parties. The Moroccan government projected that the country's oil reserves would run out in a month period. This indicates the deteriorating energy crisis in Morocco amid the nationwide protest against skyrocketing fuel prices. The Sahrawi President, Secretary General of the Polisario Front, Mr. Ibrahim Ghali, issued a presidential decree containing appointments at the level of the Sahrawi presidency's interests. The appointments concern foreign ministers as advisors to the presidency, as well as other high-ranking positions. To Turkey-Syria earthquake file now, nearly a week after the earthquake that devastated Turkey and Syria. The death toll has crossed over 40,000. Tens of thousands of rescue workers are scouring flattened neighborhoods despite freezing weather that has deepened the misery of millions now in desperate need of aid. Security concerns led some aid operations to be suspended, and dozens of people have been arrested for looting or trying to defraud victims in the aftermath of the quake. In a statement delivered after a 5-hour cabinet meeting, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan expressed his condolences to the Turkish people after the death of 35,418 people due to the deadly earthquake that hit the country more than a week ago. Usama Ayadi with more.
In a statement that took place in Ankara following a 5-hour cabinet meeting held in the headquarters of disaster agency in the country, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has announced that 35,418 people have died as a result of last week's quakes. making the deadliest such disaster since the country's founding 100 years ago.
Our country has been shaken on February 6th, with 2 earthquakes with a scale and intensity that has never been seen in our history. We've seen 2 biggest disasters in the history of Turkish Republic, one after another, since the earthquake in Erzincan in 1939.
Erdogan also revealed that 105,505 people had been injured as a result of the February 6th quakes centered around Kahramanmaraş.
The biggest earthquakes in the world occur in the oceans and affect the lands, but the earthquakes in Kahramanmaraş happen directly under the residences.
The Turkish president did not fall short on expressing his condolences to the victims' families and wished quick recovery for those injured. According to the president's statements, 98% of the collapsed buildings were built before 1999, and this shows that the country's construction standardization has been in progress.
I express my condolences to each of our 35,418 citizens who lost their lives in the earthquake. I wish speedy recovery to our 105,505 injured residents who got out of the rubble or were rescued by emergency workers.
On the same occasion, Erdogan underlined that hundreds of thousands of families lost their homes and remain with no shelter, stressing at the same time that any country would face difficult circumstances.
The fact that 98% of buildings that have collapsed in the latest disaster are the ones that built before 1999 show us the progress we made in the standardization of buildings and inspections, but it also reminds us that we need to be stricter.
To avoid such future disaster and guarantee the minimum security for people, Recep Tayyip Erdogan called for adopting stricter building regulations.
A first convoy of UN aid entered northwest Syria from Turkey via the newly bordered Bab al-Salam crossing, that is. This comes after Syrian President Bashar al-Assad agreed to allow UN aid to enter from Turkey via 2 more border crossings. Nearly 9 million people in Syria were affected by the earthquake in the United Nations. The World Health Organization, meanwhile, warned of the risk of waterborne diseases and outbreak in Turkey and Syria after last week's devastating earthquake in both countries.
The Syrian government has repeatedly expressed its commitment to deliver humanitarian aid to Syrians wherever they are on the Syrian soil. And I also affirmed that northwest Syria is an integral part of Syrian lands and that our people there are part of the Syrian people. And Syria will not accept that they be divided based on lines drawn by terrorist armed groups. Based on that, Syria supports the entry of humanitarian aid into the region through all possible cross points.
8 days after the massive earthquake that hit both Turkey and Syria, rescue teams are still making great efforts to find further survivors of what the World Health Organization called the worst natural disaster ever. Zara Frajani has the details in this report.
Rescuers in Turkey managed to pull several more people alive from the rubble on Tuesday, nearly 200 hours after the series of powerful earthquakes that struck the region. The latest rescues included 2 people from a crumbled building in Turkey's Hatay province. 2 other women were among at least 5 survivors rescued from the ruins in the same area.
We came to help our brothers here. We pulled down to this wrecked house, 2 people alive and 1 dead woman. And currently another woman is being rescued. She is still alive. All Turkish rescue teams are doing their best to find other survivors.
According to government figures, more than 158,000 survivors from the quake-hit regions fled their wrecked homes in Turkey, unsure of whether or when they will be able to return.
Evimde şükürler olsun I'm separating my family and I'm sending my children away so they don't die. We survived the earthquake. We haven't seen in 1,000 years in one night. It's the concrete that kills people.
This is very hard. God forbid anyone should go through this. We will start from zero without furniture, without feelings. We no longer have relatives there. They are all in different places.
The focus of the aid efforts has shifted to helping people now struggling without shelter or enough food in the bitter cold. The disaster, with a combined death toll in Turkey and neighboring Syria exceeding 37,000, has ravaged cities in both countries, leaving many survivors homeless in near-freezing winter temperatures.
To a different story now. The World Health Organization said on Monday that Equatorial Guinea has confirmed its first outbreak that Marburg virus, a highly infectious and deadly disease similar to Ebola, following the deaths of at least 9 people. The small Central African country quarantined more than 200 people and restricted movement last week in its Kintem province after detecting an unknown hemorrhagic fever. Neighboring Cameroon also restricted movement along its border over concerns about contagion.
The illness caused by the Marburg virus is serious and fatal. This virus causes a serious hemorrhagic fever in people. The death rate can reach 88%. To give you an idea, the death rate of COVID-19 did not reach 2%. Currently, there is no preventative vaccine.
To Palestine now. A young man was killed at dawn on Tuesday after he was seriously wounded in the head by a live bullet during the occupation forces' incursion into Al Faria camp south of Tubas. The Palestinian Ministry of Health later announced his death, revealing that he was a 17-year-old teenager named Mahmoud Majid Al-Ayadi. To Russia-Ukraine file now. Foreign ministers of 5 Western countries, that was Palestine file. Foreign ministers of 5 Western countries expressed their strong rejection against Zionist entities' government plans aimed at expanding settlements in occupied Palestine. This comes amidst a large international condemnation campaign against these unilateral measures in violation of international law and order. Salman Nasib with more in this report.
In the response to the illegal expansion of Zionist settlements, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has expressed deep concerns over the plan to legalize 9 settler outposts in the occupied West Bank. His spokesman Stefan Dujarric said that if these measures were implemented, they would further seriously undermine the prospects for a viable two-state solution. The foreign ministers of UK, France, Germany, Italy and US expressed their strong rejection over the Zionist recent decisions at expanding settlements to build almost 10,000 new homes for Jewish settlers in the occupied West Bank.
We express our great concern over the decision of the Zionist entity's government to build thousands of settlements. We strongly oppose the unilateral measures, which will only lead to an escalation between the Zionist entity and the Palestinians. We continue to follow field developments that would affect the stability of the region.
The widespread rejection of the plans of the Zionist government is expanding, calling on the occupation to stop its unilateral measures and to abide by the law and UN resolutions. For his part, Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Mohammed Shtia labeled these practices as a recipe for escalation, whose dangerous consequences will be felt in the region and the world as they threaten Palestinians' existence.
The extremist Israeli government isolated efforts to legitimize 9 illegal settlement enterprise as a first stage, and it is the time for the world to punish Israel for its gross contempt of UN resolution and the international community's repeated warnings. The state of Palestine reiterates that Israel, as an occupying power, has no sovereignty over any part of the state of Palestine.
The settlement expansion, a prominent aspect of the agenda of the occupation government, which seeks to perpetuate apartheid, comes to reinforce the continuation of many forms of Zionist aggression against the Palestinians. It's indeed a serious escalation which threatens to ignite the situation and cause undesirable consequences.
Kyrgyzstan's former president Almazbek Atambayev was relieved from prison for medical treatment abroad on Tuesday, as his case was sent for review. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison in 2020 in a case he described as politically motivated. Surprisingly, on Tuesday, the Central Asian nation's Supreme Court cancelled his sentence and sent his case for review, citing newly discovered information.
All the criminal cases against me are made up, soon with white threads. Time will prove it. I hope that the wave of justice has just begun.
Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has flown to China for a state visit on Tuesday following his Chinese counterpart invitation as an effort to strengthen economic and security ties between Iran and China. Islam Sid reports.
Chinese President Xi Jinping received his Iranian counterpart Ibrahim Raisi in Beijing. The Iranian president is on a state visit to China from Tuesday to Thursday, at the invitation of President Xi to strengthen bilateral relations between the two countries. Following the welcoming ceremony, which was broadcast on a Chinese national television, the two presidents held talks about issues including security and economy. Xi hailed the traditional friendship between China and Iran and said that the two countries strengthening cooperation and mutual trust endorse international justice.
China and Iran enjoy traditional friendship for more than 50 years since the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and Iran. Bilateral ties have stood the test of international vicissitudes through offering each other support and practicing solidarity and cooperation in face of the changes in the world, the times and history. China and Iran have prompted common interests and jointly safeguarded international equity and justice.
On his part, Raisi reiterated his commitment to deepen cooperation with China, despite the changing situation at the international level.
I believe the effective implementation of the cooperation agreements between Iran and China, the consensus reached between us today, and the development of bilateral ties will promote regional and global peace, security and stability. Although the international situations have kept changing, it will not affect the ties between China and Iran, because Iran will continue to develop its ties with China.
According to Chinese state media, President Xi stated that China would contribute positively to the resumption of talks on the Iranian nuclear agreement and express his country's support for Iran in protecting its rights and interests. Both presidents last met face-to-face in Uzbekistan last year, where they committed to forge a stronger alliance amid economic pressure that faces both countries, including the Iranian nuclear deal, the war in Ukraine, and the COVID-19 outbreak.
Germany and Belgium want to deepen their cooperation on energy issues with a view to future climate neutrality. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said on Tuesday after a meeting with Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo that the past 12 months have once again impressively shown how important that they work closely together in Europe, especially on energy issues.
Of course, that means that many investments have to be made now to increase LNG capacity, but also on the coast of Germany, and we will do that as well. But we also have to ensure the connectivity between our countries. That's why I'm very happy about the announced investments in strengthening pipeline capacity and regasification capacities here.
Now the Russia-Ukraine file. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg emphasized on the need to provide more ammunition to Ukraine during NATO defense ministers' meeting in Brussels. The Kremlin responded to this by saying that the US-led NATO military alliance is showing hostility to Russia by getting involved this way. Sofian Kinturi in this report.
NATO's defense ministers and the United States Lloyd Austin gathered on Tuesday in Brussels in a two-day meeting to discuss the provision of the military support to Ukraine at a time when Russia made a noticeable advance in the south of Ukraine. During the meeting, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg emphasized on the need to provide more ammunition to Ukraine and how to ramp up production and strengthen the defense industry due to the increase in Kiev's need and to refill West stock.
Later on today in the US-led contact group for Ukraine and address the urgent needs for increased support to Ukraine. Not least the need to provide more ammunition and also how to ramp up production and strengthen our defense industry to be able to provide the necessary ammunition to Ukraine and also to replenish our own stocks.
Defense ministers discussed about whether to provide the fighter jets F-16 to Kiev or not, in regarding the consequences on the conflict in particular and the world in general. This topic created a division so far between Germany and Poland, who own these high-precision fighter jets, and other NATO nations. For his part, Stoltenberg said that this topic is still under discussion, but NATO's provision is developing the same way as the war's development.
It is an ongoing discussion, and as I've said before, we have ongoing consultations among allies on the type of systems allies should deliver to Ukraine, and that will continue. And we have evolved. The type of support we are providing to Ukraine has changed and evolved over the time, and it will continue to change and evolve as this war develops.
NATO's involvement pushed Russia to respond. Kremlin spokesperson said on Tuesday that the West was becoming more and more involved in the conflict, and that the US-led NATO military alliance demonstrated its hostility towards Russia every day.
First of all, NATO is an organization that is hostile to us, and that proves this hostility every day. It is trying its best to make its involvement in the conflict around Ukraine as clear as possible. That's the first thing. Of course, this demands certain precautionary steps to be taken.
Moscow said weapons supplied to Ukraine by NATO countries are dragging out the conflict, a rising possibility of further escalation. Kiev and the West say deliveries of advanced military hardware are crucial in helping Ukraine defend itself against Russia's offensive. By this, the two sides thus created an equation that seems impossible to solve.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says the U.S. economy will face global headwinds. She has said the United States can pay its bills at least through early June by employing extraordinary cash management measures. Speaking to the National Association of Counties, Yellen warned that some U.S. counties' residents could lose jobs and federal benefit payments if Congress allows the United States to default on payment obligations by failing to lift the federal debt ceiling.
As many of you know, I've asked Congress to raise or suspend the debt limit. Since 1789, the United States has paid all of our bills on time, and it should stay that way. In my assessment, and that of economists across the board, a default on our debt would produce an economic and financial catastrophe. Many of your residents could ultimately lose their jobs. Household payments on mortgages, auto loans, and credit cards would rise, and American businesses would see credit markets deteriorate.
A gunman killed 3 people and injured 5 others after he opened fire on the main campus of Michigan State University on Monday midnight, that is. The 43-year-old suspect was found dead hours after the shooting. The police said he died from a self-inflicted gunshot.
We mourn the loss of beautiful souls today and pray for those who are continuing to fight for their lives. Every Spartan student, parent, and staff member should know that Michiganders and Americans everywhere are thinking of you today. President Biden and I spoke last night. He pledged his support and the thoughts of an entire nation, and we will work together to do what is necessary to help MSU community heal.
And finally, more stories making headlines in this News in Brief.
Pakistan's Navy concluded 5-day multinational maritime exercises on Tuesday, held with the participation of some 50 countries and aimed at improving security at sea. China, Australia, Turkey and Sri Lanka were among the countries in attendance at this year's exercises held every 2 years and dubbed Aman 23. which features warships, aircrafts, and special operation forces.
New Zealand declared national state of emergency for only the third time in its history on Tuesday, as the cyclone caused widespread floodings, landslides, and huge ocean swells. About 225,000 people were left without electricity, while dozens of supermarkets closed.
The U.S. feds detained 4 suspects in Florida in connection with the 2021 assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse. According to U.S. Justice Department, 11 others are now in police custody. Moïse's murder encouraged gangs to emerge and serve as the de facto authorities in large parts of the country's capital.
I know that
the World Government Summit debuted in Dubai on Monday with its 10th edition to tackle the next generation of governments and the use of innovations and technologies to address the many challenges of humanity with Shaping Future Government slogan, where world leaders are brought together to share policies and models that are important in shaping future governments.
is generated on the user's mobile application.
And with this, our program comes to an end. For more, you can visit our social media platforms. That's it for me. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.